Yes, our vendor presentation this month is going to be from Andy Van Scyoc, and he's going to talk about the East Broad Top. Andy's been associated with the Rock Hill Trolley Museum and the East Broad Top in one way or another for a very long time and since a very young age. One of his earliest memories is painting the side dump doors on hopper number 802 when that was all the higher he could reach. Andy is now the president of the Friends of the East Broad Top, after having served in several other capacities. Andy holds a mechanical engineering degree from the University of Pittsburgh and is also an active volunteer in the Washington, D.C. chapter of the National Railroad Historical Society and frequently travels with their 1923 Pullman car to the Dover Harbor. His wife, Marjorie, is also a longtime Rock Hill Trolley Museum member and volunteer. Their home is Rockville, Maryland, where you'd find the meager beginnings of a FN3 scale layout of the EBT. And with that, I'd like to welcome Andy to Off the Beaten Track. Andy is having computer problems, so we're going to, I'll be projecting his slides and he'll be talking to us over the phone.
Thank you, Pete, for the kind introduction. And then thank you all for having me tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. We have a lot to talk about. Pete, just to make sure, I have about 20 minutes is what we're targeting, right?
That's right.
Okay, so 8:36 according to my clock it'll be. So let me get into that. The East Broad Top, a lot of exciting things have been happening here the last few years, as I'm sure many of you know. So hopefully I can fill in some blanks for you and maybe leave just enough to entice you to come out and visit in person. So yeah, thank you, Pete. On to the slide 2 there shows the map showing where the East Broad Top is. The East Broad Top was roughly a 33-mile short line, 3-foot gauge in south central Pennsylvania. You can kind of see where the arrow is there. And the big thing to point out here is central Pennsylvania, of course, not a rich coal field, but to the east, northeast there really is the anthracite fields in around the Scranton area and the Poconos. And then to the southwest, to the west, really is very rich bituminous seams, right? Going deep into West Virginia and a lot of western Pennsylvania. But then there in the middle, Broad Top coal field, which was a semi-bituminous coal, which basically means it's sort of a blend almost, or not really a blend, but a hybrid really that burns clean but has the heat content of bituminous. So, but there, as I say, right there in central Pennsylvania. So coal was the biggest commodity the EBT hauled, but really the reason the railroad was created, go ahead, Pete, was to serve an iron furnace. Next slide, Pete. Mm-hmm. There we go. Iron, of course. So the next slide then is a picture of the Rock Hill. I think you might have, oh no, so this is the iron ore deposits and furnaces that were in central Pennsylvania within about 40-50 miles of Robertsdale, the headquarters of the East Broad Top at the time. And this dates iron activity into the late 17th century, certainly got to be booming in the 18th century. And then, of course, the East Broad Top was chartered in 1856 to serve the Rock Hill iron furnace. And then in 1872, construction began on the railroad itself. But next slide, please. This is actually the Rock Hill iron furnace. It was basically the largest furnace in the region by far, producing thousands of tons of iron per year. And the iron furnace certainly operated, as I mentioned, kind of started in the 18th century. And Robertsdale, the town, was founded in 1760 to give you kind of a feel for the neighborhood. And the iron furnace operated until about 1908. Obviously, by that point, the Bessemer process and Andrew Carnegie's mass production made the iron furnaces, such as Rock Hill furnace, obsolete. And so the steel industry took over and diminished the need for smaller furnaces like Rock Hill iron furnace. But next slide. The railroad certainly still had a commodity to haul, which was that coal we talked about. Supporting the iron furnace, of course, in the region, there was iron ore deposits, there was limestone and coal. Initially wood, of course, in the furnaces, but then found the coal and, of course, found that it worked better for producing iron. But the coal then was fantastic for home heating and some other metallurgical uses, and so it became its own commodity. Next slide. So, of course, hauling coal in narrow gauge hoppers, obviously early on in small wood hoppers. They even experimented with hauling the mine cars themselves directly out from the mine region, and then eventually moved on to steel hoppers in the teens and 20s as they built a fleet of 250 steel hoppers over the years, mostly built, almost entirely built in Rock Hill Furnace in the company's own shops. Peak year for coal production was 1926. The railroad hauled over 740,000 tons of coal that year, meaning that they were basically running 3, 4, and even 5 loaded coal trains every day on the 33-mile railroad. Next slide, please. So coal, obviously, in the upper left corner comes from the mines. That's mine Tipple 1, which is long gone, but you can hike around the area in Robertsdale. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. To the right was the one of the earlier coal transfer trestles. So the railroad hauled the coal from the mines in the Robertsdale area, 33 miles northeast, to a connection with the Pennsylvania Railroad at a town called Mount Union, right on the Pennsylvania's Middle Division, and transferred to the standard gauge cars there, any coal that was being sold elsewhere. In the lower left is the coal cleaning plant, which came much later and served certainly during those peak years, and then later into the end, basically in the 50s. Next slide. So the railroad did more than just coal. While coal was by far the largest single commodity, the railroad hauled many other things too. So brick, they actually didn't haul the brick so much, but if you go to the next slide, they supplied the brick factories in Mount Union. Mount Union became known as Bricktown, USA, because they produced more refractory brick there than anywhere else in the world. And refractory brick, of course, is not what you build your homes with, but refractory brick is what you line blast furnaces with in the steel industry. So even though the steel industry had sort of depleted the one industry in the region, the iron making, it was a boom in other ways with the refractory brick factory process. And one of the reasons that the refractory brick factories moved into the Mount Union area is to the south, there were great deposits of ganister rock, which is one of the key ingredients. And then, of course, the broadtop coal itself. Between those two things, you basically have some of the key ingredients to making the brick there in Mount Union and conveniently located. Okay. Next slide. The map of the railroad. So like I said, Mount Union there at the north end is the connection to the outside world of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Was the site of a huge, or large, I should say, dual gauge yard, of course, where both standard and narrow gauge operated together. Orbizonia, Rock Hill, kind of in the middle there, is the headquarters. That's where the operations are based out of then and now. That's where the shop complex is and roundhouse and operations. Then to the south, of course, the railroad starts to climb the mountains pretty significantly there as you get to Three Springs, Saltillo, up through 2 tunnels, Sidling Hill and Rays Hill tunnels, and then down to the Robertsdale area and all the mines in the area around Robertsdale with several different small branches in different places. If you look at the Rock Hill Furnace, Orbizonia area, you see the big branch line to the east that curved out through Shade Gap. That was the Shade Gap branch. That branch initially served a lot of the iron ore pits. That's the branch where a lot of the iron ore came from into the Rock Hill Furnace. In later years, it served local passenger service, some farms, other small local industries, but its last service was actually hauling cement that came in via Mount Union in standard gauge cars that were retrucked to narrow gauge and hauled out that branch to a point that could be transferred then to truck to construct the Pennsylvania Turnpike in the 1940s, in the early 1940s. And that's what kept that branch surviving as late as it did. That branch is now actually the first 2 miles of it is the Rock Hill Trolley Museum operation. And thank you. The next slide there kind of talks about the 3 eras of the East Broad Top. So the first, of course, common carrier, chartered in 1856, like I said, construction from 1872 to 1874. So what that means, of course, is we're celebrating our 150th anniversary We were stretching that over those 3 years, of course, so 2022 to 2024. But yeah, construction completed in 1874, and then basically operated over the years until 1956. April 6th of 1956 is when the last train ran in revenue service during the common carrier era. The Kowalczyk family, specifically Nick Kowalczyk, bought the railroad in 1956. Now, Nick was a salvage dealer, a scrapper, who always wanted his own train set, and so he kept it. Didn't scrap basically anything. The entire 33-mile of railroad was left in place, and all the equipment that was basically on site pretty much stayed in place. Then in 1960, the town of Orbezonia was celebrating their bicentennial and asked if the locomotive 12 could be pulled out and actually operated. And they were operated on about 4 miles of track for the bicentennial. And the rest is kind of history there, that that weekend operation was successful enough that the Kowalczyk family decided to turn it into a regular tourist operation on roughly those 4.5 miles of track, to where they could build a Y and a picnic grove at the, what became the north end of the operation at Colgate Grove. So they ran the railroad until 2011, off a century there, until 2011, and then decided it was had kind of gotten beyond their means, so to speak, in that they didn't have the resource and energy to kind of run the operation anymore, and found that the liability was just too great. And so the railroad kind of went into another slumber in 2011. Routine operations ceased, and many were concerned that was truly the end, of course. But then, next slide, please. In the 2019-2020 timeframe, this group of folks started to get together, led by one Brad Esposito, who kind of instigated what became the East Broad Top Foundation, or the EBT Foundation, more properly. And this was on opening or announcement day, February 14th of 2020. This is the group that was their board as of that day. 3 particular individuals I'll point out is Bennett Levin. He's kind of in the back left there with his thumb up. Wick Mormon is standing in front of him there in the ball cap. And then Henry Posner, kind of in the center there, just to the right of the number 12. Those 3 are definitely the bigger hitters on the original foundation board, with obvious ties there. Many of you probably recognize their names. And then I'll point out Brad Esposito is the second from the right in that photo. But a fantastic team to work with. Since that day, since 2020, their board has grown and evolved a little bit. They now have Ron Vittori, Pete Clausen, and a few others on their board that help, including Lynn Modinger too, which is a name I'm sure you all know. For various reasons. So they have quite a dynamic group, and it's a fantastic team to work with. And I'll say, as the Friends, we have a fantastic partnership with them. Next slide. So the Friends of the East Broad Top, I'll try to keep this quick. I'm watching my clock here. We were incorporated as a group of model railroaders, essentially, back in 1983. Sort of formed up in 1982. Officially incorporated May 20th of 1983, hence the 40 you can see on the caboose down below. We celebrated our 40th anniversary there 3 weeks ago on May 20th of 2023. So we started in 1983 with 14 members. As of, well, probably about a month ago, we broke 1,900. We have exploded in growth here in the past 3 years with everything happening with the foundation acquiring the railroad, bringing it back into operation, and we continue to grow. I'll highlight that we put out a quarterly magazine, The Timber Transfer, fantastic reading. We do a monthly electronic newsletter, and then our fundraising, and I'll talk about a lot of other things we do here as we go too, but our 23 fundraising campaign, our goal was $180,000 for 2023. We have already hit $232,000 for our campaign year. But I'll thank all of those of you that probably have already contributed, and very much appreciated. And I'll show you a lot of the good things we're doing with it, and certainly welcome you all to help us break 250. So thank you. And I'll point out the picture on the caboose. That's our current board of directors minus one individual. And that person that's missing is Dr. Lee Rainey there, sitting on the right, doing some lettering work on boxcar 168, I believe it is. He, for health issues, wasn't able to join us that evening at the Picnic Grove, but that's our current board of directors. All right, next slide. Together with the foundation, we're saving the East Broad Top. We've been working in Rock Hill Furnace Yard for 20 years now. Foundation, of course, came along 3 years ago. And like I said, fantastic group of individuals to work with the resources, connections, and simply abilities to do what needs to be done. So fantastic team to work with. Next slide. So of course, one of the first things you want to save, right? Everybody talks about the East Broad Top and how complete it is, right? All 6 Mikados are still there. A lot of the rolling stock, a couple hundred or more of the steel hoppers are still there, a lot of the passenger equipment. But one of the things that truly makes the EBT such an amazing place is the paperwork that's still in the station. There are 3 vaults just full of paperwork. This picture obviously shows some maps and drawings, and this is just one little corner of the vaults. There is 5,000 linear feet estimated of paper material here for the archives to go through and assemble and catalog, which is just a tremendous volume. And what's amazing is the corporate minutes are on the shelf in the vault from 1872 to 1956. So it's just a fantastic collection. And what we're doing is getting a lot of that online. So if you go to the website listed at the top there, which is also pretty easy to Google, by the way, if you just type in East Broad Top Archives, you'll come to it. But there's over 1,700 items already scanned. That's photos, that's documents that you can look at for free through our archives website. Now, what you'll see in some of the pictures, I'll show you actually the next page, please. You'll see that some of the pictures and whatnot are all watermarked. For a fee, small fee, $4, $5, you can get the photos without the watermark, but they are free to look at, and for most part, the watermarks certainly don't interfere if you're just looking for modeling information or whatever. And so a fantastic case in point here. The picture I have there for you, the picture on the right is the original photo. It's a group of rail fans in the yard sometime probably around 1940. We don't have a date for certain, but based on some details, it looks like the early 40s. And why I pointed out or blew up that one section on the left there, which is the very left side of the right photo, you can see those 2 doors there in the car shop. Well, literally this past weekend, we were working on that end of the car shop. And if you would go to the next slide. Well, so before you move, I'll point out the 2 windows on the doors there in the very left are the same window, right? If you look at the images now on the screen, that is the car shop. The bottom left and bottom right were just taken this past Saturday and Sunday, 2 days ago. And you can see that door, the second door from the right there, has a smaller window. Well, that's how the shop has been since at least 1956. It had that smaller window, but literally we're standing there contemplating, do we just make it match the others? And we searched the archives from our smartphones and literally found this photo that confirms that at one time all 6 windows were the same. So field research, truly in the field. So the car shop, one of our many projects, that one came along pretty quickly. You can see it was one of the last walls that we had yet to restore, but you can see just in the past couple of months, we got all 6 doors rebuilt. We're putting the windows back in. We have 5 of the 7 windows in place. We need to do the one above the doors, but that was literally just painted on Sunday morning. Next, please. The coal tipple, another project the Friends did, thanks to generous contributions from people like yourselves. On the left, you can see the coal tipple for 20 or so years was without its shed on top. The shed was just deteriorated to the point that it was no longer safe. So it was mercifully pulled down 20, 25 years ago. Last September, we framed up the new one using some of the steel framing from the original, but all new wood, of course, and then bought all new tin siding and had that put up. And that was done in about a 2-week time frame, 2 to 3 weeks. That was completed. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm sorry. The coal tipple will also house fire suppression pumps. So one of the things the foundation has been working hard to do is put fire suppression in all of the shop buildings in Rock Hill. The pumps for that are going to live in the lower portion of the coal tipple. The carpenter shop, another fantastic building. We have done a lot to restore. You can see in the bottom photo that it was sinking into the ground and on the verge of collapse. In the top right, you can see what it looks like. I believe I took that Saturday. And so that shop now has a poured concrete floor, and a portion of it that is going to become our carpenter shop, where for the most part it's going to be our window shop, but general carpentry work can be done. So that's going to be restored to its original use as well. Okay, next slide. One of our more exciting building projects, the storehouses. If you've been to Rock Hill, you may remember the stone house just across from the turntable from the roundhouse. Behind it are these two storehouse buildings, and literally every part they're ever needed were stored in these buildings. And you can see on the right how much the first one there had sunk into the ground. It was almost 3 feet into the ground around the edges. And there, the picture on the left was taken Sunday. They had just hung the superintendent's sign back up. They had just put the molding on that siding fascia there above the two doorways. Those two doors are being made in one member's garage. He'll have those for us probably next month, and then we can come close to completing the project, which is fantastic. Next picture, please, or next slide. What's inside that building is literally 700 bins. So in order to, and you can see on the right how the building was curved and arced as it had sunk over the years, but in those bins were still thousands of rivets of every size, nuts, bolts, square bolts, or square nuts, I should say. And everything. We found original Lincoln pin links that were still wire banded together with the shipping tag on them. And so just amazing the things you would find. To do the work on the building, we had emptied literally everything out, 40,000 pounds plus of material pulled out of that building so that we could straighten the building, and cataloged, and everything's been put back in the original bin it came out of. Next. No railroad would be complete without track work. We have just a tireless track crew. Here in May, the photo in the top left was taken in May. In 2 days, we laid 800 feet of track, put spikes in 800 feet of track that has not seen actual trains since 1956. You can see in the distance of that photo the coal tipple. So we're just starting to work south from Rock Hill. By fall, we should have almost a mile complete to the 475 road crossing, which is just south of Rock Hill. But the right-of-way has been cleared well past that, and so we expect to start working on track beyond. Exciting times, and that's some of the track you can see in the other photos. The speeder pictured there is sitting at the 475 crossing, with every third time and place you can run speeders that far. Next slide. And sorry, I'll try to move along quickly here. The Saltillo Station, another project we're fundraising for. We actually did fundraise about $25,000 to start the drawings and whatnot. Unfortunately, the original Saltillo Station was torn down about 25 years ago on the verge of collapse, with no particular preservation path. The building was taken down. However, a number of things were saved from it. Some architectural details, we'll call them. And there in the bottom left, you can see historic architect John Bowie has been working on drawings for us, and we plan to rebuild this station here in the next couple of years. I don't have a timeline for you, but the way it was phrased to us, the friends, was the foundation came to us one day and said, you know, we would not be upset if a Saltillo Station happened to would reappear here in the next 2 or 3 years, indicating their interest to get track and trains back to Saltillo. First time since 1956. So we're very much looking forward to that. Next slide. Robertsdale, the south end where the coal mines were. This is where the Friends kind of own some of the puzzle. The 3 buildings there, we actually own the station on the far right. In the middle is the what's called the old post office. Those 2 buildings are Friends owned. The company office building on the left is still owned by the foundation. But that is where, if you click the next slide, you can see all 3 got new roofs in the past 2 years, by the way. But there's our museum displays. We have a small but very professional museum there in Robertsdale. We also give walking tours of the mine areas, and we also give handcar rides. And then hopefully here soon, we'll have 2 rail bikes on about a mile of EBT trackage there around the Robertsdale area. Next slide. This is Robertsdale, as I mentioned. There we go. Robertsdale handcar rides, a little makeshift bridge over a culvert that the track crew put in, but you can see all the new ties. There's actually now moved 3 hoppers we moved up there that we'll soon repaint in front of the station. All right, now on to some of the operational stuff. Real quick, the railroad just bought 4 new coaches. All 4 are now on site. 3 are truly coaches. 1 is a combine. The combine actually has full powered wheelchair lift and everything, which makes the railroad even more accessible. They're very nice. They blend in very well. And the idea is that they're going to run those routinely. And then some of the wooden equipment, as it's operable, will be run for special occasions or charter or whatever, but take some of the wear and tear off the wood cars by running these new cars. These new cars were built by Hamilton Manufacturing, who built a lot of the White Pass and Yukons coaches as well. Okay, next, just about done here, and I'll say, you know, no presentation on a steam railroad is complete without some gratuitous steam locomotive photos, right? So here you go, 16. This is literally Sunday morning as I was walking to the work site. It was sitting there, and you know, you can't walk past it and not take a picture, right? But you can see 16 just off the turntable being readied for the day. And the stone house I mentioned earlier is right behind it there. Next picture. So 2 pictures here. The picture on the right I took at Winter Spectacular back in February when 16 first made its public debut. She performed beautifully that weekend. Had one bearing around a little hot, and that was not a bearing problem truly, but more the grease cellar was the problem there. But anyway, so she's been performing quite well and putting on a good show for everybody. On the left side, you can see some of the overhaul work. Obviously, they had taken all the flues out. We can talk for hours about everything they did on 16, but great picture here by Matthew Malkowitz in the boiler of them cutting out the flue sheet, which then the flue sheet got cut up into pieces and were available for sale. And I think I still have a few of those laying around if anybody wants one. But obviously, the engine came back together very well, and I think the plan is to start working on 15 later this summer to bring a second engine online. Next slide, please. I think this is actually my last slide, just another gratuitous picture of 16. This is another Matthew Malkowitz photo. This is over in the yard in front of the car shop, actually, and you can see the coal tip away in the background there with the new shed on it. But fantastic photo that would be hard to date if you didn't know some of the minor details there with the coal shed and things like that. But anyway, definitely I recommend people come out and visit. Next slide is just our organization. So like I said, we have the East Broad Top Foundation, which is the actual operator owner of the railroad now, and a fantastic partner. Then you have the Friends of the East Broad Top, who I am with, that you can get to by febt.org. We certainly welcome new members. We certainly welcome contributions, and I certainly welcome questions and comments too. And then I just put it here to make it a little more convenient for everybody too. The archives and special collections and the website there, which is very much a joint program between the Friends and the East Broad Top Foundation. So please come visit when you get a chance, and I'll join and contribute.